Good evening and welcome to Community Forum. I'm your host, Byron Campbell. Of course, Chris Diali is my co-host. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Byron, and good evening to our viewers.
We have an interesting program for you tonight. We have a surprise guest, but before that, as usual, we go into our community affairs chat. Chris, I want to start with expressing condolences to Beverly Sinclair on her passing, to her family and friends and relatives. Beverly, well, we both worked with her before. I would admit that she's the one that introduced me to this type of work, Chris, honestly. She recruited me. She came into my office one day and said, Byron, look, we have UDecide program. Can you help us? Can you join us? But Beverly was certainly a journalist to be reckoned with. She stand firm on the matters that she felt serious about. Passing of an icon.
I certainly want to join with you, Byron, in extending condolences to our family as well. She and I work together on the same UDecide program and some other programs, which is some election watches and so on. And yes, she was a journalist of a certain caliber, and of course, I believe the world of journalism was certainly going to miss her and her contributions. And again, we've had some deaths in recent times that have certainly of our women ladies in serious leadership positions that
It's true.
that is a challenge.
Yeah, that certainly took me by surprise. Chris, making the headline news this evening was this report where a reward of $100,000 US, that's more than $250,000 EC dollars, being offered for anyone providing information, evidence leading to the arrest, conviction of the persons responsible for the death of John T. This death that happened a couple of weeks ago. But what is, and all over social media in fact, but what is worrying about this, at least many people think so, is the allegations or the assumptions made in the posting of this. And also involved in that is one Yvette Noel Schuss. I hope I get in the last name correct. But clearly there's an assumption there that the killing or the murder of this individual had to do with sexual orientation. And as far as I know, that an active investigation, and based on the police report also, active investigation is taking place. There's no conclusion in terms of the reason or the motivation for this hideous crime, if we could call it that. What's your take on this? You read the post?
I read the post, and I took umbrage at what was put there as well. And as you said, there is this assumption that the gentleman's life was taken away because of his sexual orientation. There is no evidence to show that. And the police have an active investigation going on. As a matter of fact, our Royal Grenada Police Force has an excellent record when it comes to solving crimes of that nature and others. So I think they should let the process go through and then come to the fact that, and come to an understanding of why the young man's life was taken. And in the world of homosexuality, there is a lot of other reasons why the young man's life could have been snuffed out. It could be a quarrel between their own and that sort of thing, or a lover's quarrel or spat.
We don't know.
We don't know, and I think we should let the process, take its course and end up at a point where we could say for sure this is what happened. But I think beyond that, Byron, is the fact that, here is this person putting out this reward. I think there's an undertone here that says the police is not sure what they're doing, and they're trying to push this at a particular pace. But more than that, it's malaligning our country, saying that we have some sort of fear or some sort of issue with that community, and that we probably, I don't want to use the word homophobic. I think people are fair. People probably against some of them and their lifestyle. But here you're maligning our country. We are a tourist destination, and you're sending out a message there to 7 million plus people who are looking at these posts and saying, well, what is happening in Grenada? We're killing gays because of whatever, and so on, their sexual orientation. And there's no evidence to support that.
I agree with you, Chris. And it's interesting. I mean, when you go to the website, Katila, 7 million people, it's a lot of people. But Grenadians and others are responding. And I just want to reference one post here, an individual, a Grenadian. Tyler, there has been nothing to suggest that this is the case, in other words, the accusation. Murdering people because of their sexuality is not a practice of Grenadians. This isn't Afghanistan, Iran, Qatar, where you can be killed for impressing your sexuality. We are glad you're offering a reward of the funds. However, I'm also saddened by the impact of the inaccuracies of the post. Thousands of people on my small island, which is extremely sensitive to crime, rely on tourism. On your post to your 7 million followers, paint us as a country where you can be murdered for your sexuality. So I like this kind of response. It shows that we are standing up to this and we are not taking this lightly. But this has far-reaching implications.
And you know, there seem to be, Byron, just to end on this, that there is a move in the world, especially among first world nations, to impose their own belief. And when you look at the situation between Jamaica and the United States, and what is happening there with the ambassadors and so on, here you have a country, a sovereign country like Jamaica, that says it's illegal to recognize same-sex marriage. And you are enforcing and saying, if you don't, and change your law, we respond by cutting the visa of your ambassadors to the US. I mean, this is just ridiculous in my view, and unacceptable that one country will try to force themselves on particular social or cultural norms that they believe is normal for them and should be normal for us. I mean, I just...
Reasonable. Yes. Chris, I've always liked to touch on the agricultural sector, give it a, let's open it up. Good news is that we are in the end of August, but I'm to understand that beginning later this week, Maribor will be open for propagation station will be open for the distribution of the purchase of plants. This is a good thing. Usually in the past this would be in June, but somehow it's moving back, because the farmers need as much lead time as possible to have growth before the dry season comes in.
I heard they're planning to give out 1,000 spice cinnamon trees plants, and you don't have to pay.
Okay.
So I'm lining up to go and get some. But Byron, what's happening with the mango shipment? I know they had a shipment of mango that was done by, was it Marketing Board?
Well, no, I think it was Farm Fresh Produce, that did this shipment. And because we had the announcement earlier in the year that the United States gave the okay, the authorities give the okay for the import of Grenada mangoes into the United States. And that's a good deal because we still have the mango seed weevil, but it's managed now to some respect. But my information is that we only had one shipment. So, and the persons, I spoke to them actually, the problem is with freight. I'm to understand the absence of freight. I don't know what other issues exist, but clearly most of the crop would have spoiled this year. I mean, you drive around and you see tons and tons of mangoes just wasting, very unfortunate. But I'm still hopeful that next year we'll be able to put something in order so that farmers, households can in fact benefit from this very lucrative market, because we have quite a lot. And even in some agro-processing, the government has this big honesty agenda. I hope that we can really, that would be transformative, Chris, I'm hopeful. But even staying on the agriculture, we still have a lot of issues with farm access roads in terms of accessibility. The level of maintenance we normally would have seen in the past, I'm not seeing this at all. And it is urgent, it is really needed and necessary, I think, because farmers, not only do they have the high increasing price of inputs, but the road access is really very critical. So I'm hopeful that in the next budget or the government can find some resources to pay some attention to the critical area of access.
I could say that when you look at what's happening with the roads, the main roads are being taken care of.
Yeah.
The government could get kudos for that.
Okay.
But on the farm roads, I suppose because the majority of them are concrete, I don't know if that is posing a different issue for the maintenance versus the asphalt roads that they're doing on the main roads.
Well, a lot are not even concrete. I mean, some are concrete. There are projects, I think, to rehabilitate a number of significant ones. But as we do that, I think it's important to, because what I observed in the past was you had more, I don't want to call them debushing crews, but you had more maintenance, more clearing and more cutting of overhangings and that type of thing. We're not seeing much of this now. Of course, farmers also have a responsibility. They can come together and help themselves. So that's the agricultural sector. We look forward really to the plant distribution. There's a lot of excitement around that.
Well, I ahead of the game because I planted mine already. But Byron.
Yes, Lord.
I know. Recently I got a snippet that the chairman of the Queen Show Committee resigned,
Yeah.
citing issues of differences and so on. What is your thoughts on that?
Well,
I mean,
well, yeah, and I mean, looking at the newspaper, I'm going to take my hint from the newspapers, but clearly, individuals apparently that were associated in one way or another, or may have been associated in one way or another with the previous administration, were involved in the management or on the committee undertaking the Queen Show, and there was a lot of hype about it, you know, in terms of pre-interviews and fashion
I saw
shows.
some very well done videos.
And a lot of people got excited. So I don't know whether, to what extent, there might have been political, I wouldn't call it interference, but political directions on it. But clearly the chairman resigned, apparently because she would have felt that it was a bit too sticky for her, you know, and the other persons who were serving the committee, according to my information, are no longer serving on this committee. Whatever the situation is, I mean, this is unfortunate, clearly, because I believe, Chris, that it doesn't matter. The election happened more than a year ago. It's done. It's finished, you know. We all have a responsibility. Grenada has to be built by all of us, everybody. And it doesn't matter. I don't care whether it's green or yellow or blue or red. We need to put those things aside and look at the talent, look at the abilities, because that is what's going to bring Grenada forward.
Yeah, well, I was observing the change in how it was being promoted.
Yeah.
The young ladies, how they were being profiled. I saw videos being done with them talking about the constituency which they came from, or the parish, and which I thought was very well done and executed. So, you know, it was creating a difference in what we knew Queen Show was before. And you're really showing the young ladies to be professionals and so on and so forth. So I thought it was going pretty well. So I'm disappointed now to hear, you know, that there's difficulties now at the planning and at that level, at the organizing of the Queen Show. So let's hope the Spice Mass Corporation could get it back in
in place. We still wish for a successful Queen Show, ultimately, you know. Chris, of course, the violence is still there. I mean, we're going to be, in fact, our host, our guest is, in fact, I can give our viewers to discuss this issue of violence and how we're going to deal with it. Because on that note, I mean, just speaking casually to persons involved in the emergency services, relate that the level of, you're not hearing about it on the news, but the level of incidents or violence with knives and other weapons of this nature is on the increase. Particularly in this season. In fact, the police tonight also commented about this, you know, although the Prime Minister would have been talking about controlling guns. But I think the key issue here for me, from my perspective, is not so much guns. It had to do with a lot of the social issues, a lot of the community issues, you know, and how we attack those, you know. We'll hear a lot from our guests tonight on this, Chris. Yeah. So viewers, please stay with us. We'll be right back with our special guest in a moment. See you soon.
Concerned about your general health and wellness?
Do you need to know your complete blood count, lipid profile, or HbA1c?
Maybe you need to get a renal, thyroid, or liver function test.
Interested in STI screening for HIV, syphilis, herpes, chlamydia, or gonorrhea?
All of these tests, plus hundreds more, are available at Allied Laboratories.
Allied Laboratories welcomes you. You can find us here on Gladstone Road in Grenville, in the building next to Calico, on the second floor, adjacent to Dr. Isaac's office. Or you can find us here on Grand Anse Main Road, adjacent to South Winds, opposite the entrance of Excel Plaza. Contact our Grenville branch at 410-3488 or 419-1588, or send us an email at alliedlabgrenville@gmail.com. You can contact our Grand Anse branch at 403-3488 or 404-3488, or send us an email at alliedlabstgeorge@gmail.com.
Fit for life and Allied Laboratories, we're taking care of Grenada.
Welcome back, viewers. And as indicated by my co-host Byron, our special guest this evening to discuss youth and violence among our youth is, well, I normally know him as Senator Devon Rashid, but he has many titles because he was serving in the Senate when I was there. He's an economist and consultant by profession, immediate past president of the Grenada Alliance of Evangelical Churches, current vice chair of Caribbean Evangelical Alliance, and of course, he is the Bishop of Agape Ministries. Senator, good evening. Pleasure to have you.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to be here, and good evening to all of your viewers and listeners. And on behalf of myself and, of course, my congregation at Agape Ministries, really good to be here with you.
Look, Grenada still has, when we compare it with other countries of the world, a very low crime rate. Very low.
Correct.
Yet what we've seen in recent times could be considered alarming and unacceptable. In other words, for us it is alarming from the point of view that as you turn on the news, you hear about murders, you hear about stabbing, you hear about violence acts, you hear about suicides, you hear about, in other words, we are very uncomfortable about this. It is not, we need to fix this, so to speak. It is not our culture, it's not who we are to be so expressing so much violence against each other. And I'm to understand that as a religious organization in your leadership, you now embark on an initiative that you think will, to address this issue. Tell us a bit about the initiative and how you intend to address this issue of crime in the island states.
Certainly, Byron. Like you, we are very concerned about the current state of affairs, the state of violence that we have been seeing in our country in recent times. In fact, the statistics support that it has been alarming. Just recently, the statistics as provided by the Royal Grenada Police Force suggests that just in terms of homicides in 2022, between the period of January to July, we had 3 homicides. And compared to that period, January to July of 2023, we have had 14 homicides. We're speaking about close to a 500% increase.
That's correct.
And that in itself is alarming. And we haven't yet factored in suicides, we haven't factored in other violent crimes that we have seen. I remember it must have been about 2 years or so ago, and don't hold me to the timeline, there was a trend of suicides happening in the St. Patrick area. It was in that vicinity. There was a trend, very, very alarming. It was like almost every week there was another suicide that was taking place, or an attempted suicide and so forth. And at that time, I was serving as the president of the Alliance of Evangelical Churches for Grenada. And I felt real urging on my spirit that the churches need to do something, more than just what we always do, which is that we are always engaged on a weekly basis in our various prayer meetings, in praying for the nation. We engage in our Sunday services, in preaching, in trying to give hope to people and so forth. But we recognize that this was out of the ordinary. And as such, we thought it necessary to go up to St. Patrick, to the community, and hold a public event where we came together, pray, encourage the community, and so forth. And following that event, there was no suicide. I'm not saying that that is the sole reason why there were no suicides, because obviously there were other community interventions and so forth that was taking place. But in my mind, that would have been one of the central reasons. Sometimes we don't play the importance of spirituality and the importance of God intervention. We don't play also the impact of spiritual forces, evil forces, in terms of driving human behavior. And I believe what we've been seeing in our community, to a large extent, have been driven by evil forces that have been influencing mainly our youth to act out in a very violent manner. And as such, as the church, when it concerns spiritual matters, we have a responsibility to address this in a spiritual way.
Help me to understand the expression evil forces. That's important.
Well, fundamentally, we believe that there is the existence of good and evil. And every human being has the propensity to either behave in either way, a good way or an evil way, a way that helps society, or a way that don't press and depresses society. And every individual on a daily basis, when it comes to decisions that you made, if you are aggravated, somebody says something that is hurtful to you, there are two voices, if you will, that is sort of debating internally. How do you respond? Do you ignore? Do you respond in a positive way? Or is it that you will act out? Do you hit, for example? And if you are carrying a weapon, is it the time to pull that weapon out and to use that weapon? And we have recognized that some of these forces are spiritual in nature, forces that are driven by the devil, by Lucifer, demonic forces, generational curses, necromancy, and so forth, that affects individual. And these forces can cause people to behave in ways that are unseemly. Oftentimes, when people commit crimes, you hear the parents saying, but this is a nice person. He's a good guy. He's never been like that. You know, what drives a human being to look at your own parent and murder your own parent, for example?
You made an important point. You made a point there that I'd like to take your point. Because it seemed to me that the presence of eternal hellfire and as a place of punishment for the forces of evil doesn't seem to be a deterrent of violent actions. Is the church failing? Are you failing your message to reach the people on this very important point?
I don't think it's a failure in the messaging. It's a matter of people having the gift that is given to them by God of free will. Free will to make decisions. And oftentimes people act in the spur of the moment, some of them to their own regret. After acting out, some people after they act out, they themselves are in shock. They cannot believe what they have done. And I'm not accrediting every violent act to some evil force to say that it's not individuals who are making bad decisions and choices. But there are certainly some violent acts, especially when you see this type of spikes that can point to evil force. And obviously as a church, we see ourselves as the place where we have to discern what is happening. And what I have felt in this period is the same feeling I had 2 years ago when we had the situations happen in St. Patrick, that there is something fundamentally wrong in Grenada, and part of it is spiritual. There are evil forces that is roaming this country, forces of death, forces of murder that are causing people to behave in ways that are unseemly.
And I know Chris is waiting, he has a lot of questions, but I have one follow-up matter in here, because a recent crime where a young person lost an arm, one of the rationale, the justification for this was that retaliation, like I was hurt before by this individual in an incident that happened, I think, as much as 2 years ago. So here, let me quote a passage in Matthew for you. And that's important. I want you to respond. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you in the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Is there a contradiction in the verse? Is this individual taking on his own to retaliate, because the Bible gave him, that's his rationale, the justification to respond. In other words, I was hurt, so I'm hurting back.
No, in fact, the verse is very clear. The verse is making a comparison between an old covenant that existed at the time before the Old Testament, where under the Mosaic law, it was preached that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Whatever you do should be done back to you as recompense for your folly. And what the verse is saying is under the new covenant, after the coming of Christ, this dispensation of grace, instead of retaliating, you should turn the other cheek, in that you should not hit back because somebody hit back. You should make the more positive decision. Not literally like somebody slap you, say, okay, come just slap the other one as well, right? But the writer is advocating here that instead of a retaliation, you should try to maintain peace.
Well, and I want to take you up on a different angle, but in relation to it, in that we could come from the same verse there, because in a recent program that we had, it was pointed out to us, which I thought was most interesting, that when you look at the demographics of who is doing these violent acts, it's predominantly male. That is, you're hearing about these acts happening. The other thing is that the intelligence level of the persons perpetrating these acts are far below the average. And you have a situation where that is causing them not to be able to distinguish and to say to themselves, this could lead here or lead here. I need to de-escalate and do something different.
Yes.
Right? So it's like the person was saying, the social worker, social person was saying that seems to be a major cause, coupled with the fact that we have many homes where the family unit is not as we knew it. So it's either single mothers bringing up, there's no father figure in the home, and so on. And that is obviously affecting the children or the young people from those homes, and how that is escalating because of their level of maturity from an intelligence point of view, they're not able to distinguish and to control things. Do you, as a church, and from where the church sits, see this as an issue, as a cause that will be giving us the effect of all this chopping and maiming and all the rest?
Most certainly, and I don't think I could have put it better than you did. Because all these matters that you outline are matters that Scripture speak to. In the first place, the family unit and the need for the nuclear family where you have husband, wife, and children. To a great extent, culturally or otherwise, we reject that. We believe that this is a suggestion and that this is not something we should follow. But here we are seeing the statistics showing that outside of that structure that is advocated by the Word of God, there is a problem. The perpetuation of crime in our society, which is affecting all of us. Whether you have lost a relative or not, crime affects all of us. In fact, crime affects our behavior. You know, where we used to be able to hang out, we may not be able to hang out before. Places that we used to feel safe, we do not feel safe before. So in some way or the other, it's affecting all of us. Then we spoke about decision making, in that persons seem not to be well placed to make decisions, to discern what decisions to make. And obviously, this is in the case that you pointed out, mostly on males. Well, the Bible speaks strongly about the need to empower the male in terms of the male ability to lead and so forth. It was just a couple weeks ago my church held a men's conference for this very purpose with over 50 men, because we recognize as the church we have a responsibility to empower men. But this begs the question, what has our society done in terms of our males? And I believe to a large extent, I feel very strongly about this, that we have emasculated our males. And we are speaking here about a society with the last statistics that we have for Grenada that is majority males. Majority of our population.
It's a small majority.
Right, but it's majority, all right. Unlike most countries.
Let me just say
males.
this before you go on, to tell our viewers that the lines are open. We have a telephone number there. You can call in. Yeah, thank you. Remember, be respectful. Thank you. Continue.
Yeah, so we are majority males. And I know that we have done a lot in female empowerment, and that is great and to be commended. I have no problems with this. I only have daughters, so I would love to see females empowered, right? However, when you empower your females and your males are left, who are these females getting married to? Who are they building families with? So there have to be a balance in terms of the empowerment of our male. When you look at the CPA that was just completed, the majority of persons who sat the CPA were boys. When you go into primary schools, the majority of persons in most classes are males. By the time you reach mid-secondary school, that majority kind of balances out and is half male and female. By the time you get to CSEC, the majority do sit-in exams are females. By the time you get to TAM CC, the vast majority of persons at tertiary level is females. We don't even talk for university.
That's correct.
So that paints a picture of the problem that we have in our society.
And I would support you there 100% because I've seen it for years. And that you see this is a societal change as our women are empowered. And they get into their careers and so on, and the level of independence grows within the female population. As I said, there's nothing wrong with that. The issue is what is happening to the males, and what are we doing to help empower males to get them back to understand that there needs to be a balance. But above and beyond, we seem to be getting to the causes of some of these things, but what are we doing as solutions? So, for example, you know, in the United States, when we have all these mass shootings every week, every 2 weeks, and so on, the first thing they point to is mental issues.
Yeah.
And these people are not having mental issues. You will hear the church in the U.S. talk about, you know, we stop praying in schools, we stop doing this, we stop encouraging the spiritual part of the being, which some believe that is also detaching us from what is supposed to be in terms of a balance.
Yes.
All right. So the issue is the religious community looking at counseling? Are they looking at different types of mechanisms that they could put on that will deal with dispute resolution? Young people, how do you handle an issue? If there's an issue that comes up with your fellow young person, male or female, how do you discharge the situation? Are there initiatives within the church community that is looking in that direction?
Yeah, so we have done a whole plethora of programs concerning how you address these issues. First of all is preventative. And the best way to prevent is by getting people to have respect for human life, for humanity, and to have some level of accountability. And that accountability, as far as the church is concerned, is to our Creator, the higher being who created us. That there is a recognition in the sanctity of human life. Imagine from the book of Genesis, Cain killed his brother Abel, and God held him accountable. But even with that accountability, God himself placed a mark on Cain that nobody should return violence in terms of killing Cain. So that was established from very early in Scripture, that respect for human beings and for human life. And I believe in a sense we have lost this as a society, and that boils down to not just in terms of violence, but the respect that we have for each other on a daily basis. I'm sure you drive, and oftentimes if you drive a little bit too slow, somebody pull up next to you and they will rock to bad words in your tail, to use local parlance, right? And that shows that as a society we have lost our regard for each other, we have lost our respect. And we see demonstrated in social media spaces. You express your opinion, people will come at you, they will cuss off at you, and so forth. And that shows that we have just lost respect for each other. And
But how do we turn that back? How do we get away
we turn that around by returning to what was meant for the ideal design of the human race, which is that we must operate within a certain construct. It's not a wild, wild west where everybody do as they like. We cannot operate a moral system where everybody do as is right in their own eyes and expect that it'll work. There have to be right and wrong, acceptable behavior and behaviors that are not acceptable. There have to be a value system.
And penalties if you deviate from it.
Almost certainly.
Yeah, because the laws in our country will try to keep that in check as well.
That's right.
And we will argue that, and Byron and I have had this argue about flogging and so on, and that we disagree on. But you will have the thing where penalties are put in the law, not ready to enforce them, but to detract people from going there.
Yes.
Because if you go there, this is what you will suffer or get done.
Yes.
And our prisons are full. Our prisons are overflowing.
Overflowing.
Yes.
And when you look at the demographics in the prison, it is young people, a lot of them.
Repeating.
And coming back.
Yes.
And even though we have good programs in the prison to rehabilitate and get them, as you say, give them some moral guide, not only to learn a skill or so, but to let them know that you must pay respect and appreciate the other human and the other person's difference in opinion to yours, which may cause some sort of conflict or so down the road.
Yes, and I'm happy you mentioned the prison because there are entities that are church-related entities like Adult and Teen Challenge that have been doing marvelous work in the prison. And the statistics globally in terms of the work Adult and Teen Challenge has shown that in the intervention with prisons and crimes and so forth, that the rate of return prisoners and perpetrators have been very low. In fact, they have an 80% success rate. And what they're doing is really discipleship, biblically based discipleship. Whereas you have other psychological programs globally that have just about a 5% success rate. So the statistics is there to show that if we follow God's standard, the way God structured this, and I don't want people to believe I'm being superficial tonight or overly spiritual, right? But in a practical way, the nuclear family, this is very practical. How do you raise your children? The sanctity of of human life, and recognizing accountability to a higher being, that there's somebody who created this person who is special, who is unique, who must be respected.
I just want to remind viewers that you can call in at 440-8442. You talk about the nuclear family.
Sure.
But the reality in our society is now that it's moving to a majority, a large amount. There's over 45% of our homes are headed by single mothers, single women. So that's an issue of socialization, the level of attention the young male is receiving from that level.
Yes.
So I just want to know that, and what are the consequences of that? What results from that in terms of that socialization we talk about? When in a lot of cases you have the young women, the girls are able to, they learn time management, they do a lot of chores at home. The young men, basically, they go and play, they don't get, even in the schools, 90%, I think that's the last number I heard, teachers are women, females, So in other words, where is the male influence in the young male? But my question to you has to do with a holistic approach to dealing with these issues of crime prevention, violence prevention, And the initiative being pursued now by yourself and leading this initiative of involving the church, the religious community, kudos. But the wider approach, is the government in any way? Previously, I heard about the social partners, and your sector was involved but other NGOs and other community organizations involved. Essentially, this is a community issues,
Yes.
has to be addressed at that level. Is there any initiative of that nature that you know about, or do you believe such an initiative would be useful?
Well, certainly when you have national issues like this, you
Yeah.
need a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Because there's so much the church can do by itself.
Yeah.
We need to play our role, and we are seeking to play our role. But certainly, the government has a leading role to play in bringing all of the different sectors together. Formerly, I'd served on the Social Partners Forum, and post the general election, I don't know if that even exists. In fact, I have never been invited to a meeting since.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I can't say.
if
I
that
used to
is
sit on it
existing,
as well.
so-
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and there have not been a meeting that I've been invited to, and I haven't resigned from my organization. So I believe if our organization was engaged, that I would know about a meeting, right? And so this is something naturally that I would use this opportunity to encourage the administration, that you need to bring social partners together, the different stakeholders on the table, so that we can have a multi-pronged approach to this issue. Outside of that, I believe we have work to do in terms of how we manage our prison system, certainly in terms of the consequence of crime. And our society have been crying out about it. And we know that marijuana, for example, have its negative effects on individuals. And there have been a lot of debate on the marijuana issue. But there's a feeling outside it publicly that you probably get a greater punishment being caught with an amount of marijuana than you will if you take somebody's life. And sometimes when you look at some of the sentences, it seem to the public to be ludicrous, right? In terms of the number of years people get for taking someone's life. So we have to look at these matters, and also our system for rehabilitation. When you go to the prison, do you just go there, sit there for a period of time, serve your time, and then you come back out in society? What is being done in terms of rehabilitation? But again, more than responding to crime, what measures are in place for crime prevention? And my past life, I worked with the Ministry of Youth directly on this issue. In fact, when I worked with the Ministry of Youth, I was privileged to be able to work with a program that was addressing some of the gang violence that was emerging at that time.
Yeah.
We had the Ginger Crew, the Cribs, the Bloods,
Yeah.
and so forth. People couldn't travel from the Carolinas to go to Wall Street.
That's right. And St. David's
Right,
was a
and
hotbed.
there was a lot of violence at the time, and so we have a model as to what worked. And what worked then was engaging these groups in real conversations. I remember us bringing these so-called gangs together to sit around the table with the policymakers and to sit around the table with the members of the hierarchy of the Royal Grenadier Police Force and people like that, where they were able to ventilate some of the issue. Because sometimes we look at crime perpetrated by young people, and there's a lot of frustration that is driving crime. You have unemployment. So someone is unemployed. They are from a broken family. They don't believe there's any reason to live because they apply for a loan at the bank. That is rejected. They don't have land to do agriculture. They don't know where the next bill is coming from. And so they're already frustrated, and they end up in St. George. For example, for the most part, they consume a lot of alcohol, which is another thing that Grenada leads with
I had that
in
on
terms
this.
of the
Yeah,
alcohol
follow up with that,
consumption.
yeah.
They consume a whole lot of alcohol, which affects the behavior pattern, the way they think, the way they process, and all of that. And then another frustrated person ends up in a confrontation with them. And then there's a clash, two frustrated person. But these people leave home, as we saw today from this release from the Royal Grenadier Police Force, with weapons, screwdrivers, and knives, and machetes, and so forth. They leave home with these things. For what reason? Not to do agriculture, right? Not to peel fruits, but probably to defend themselves. So some may say it's an offensive weapon, others may say, well, I'm walking there to defend myself. But it's anticipating violence and
Yeah.
how I will respond
Yes.
if there is violence.
You know,
so
Devon,
we have to address these issues.
Byron and I spoke about this. You know, in our days, you younger than us, of course.
Yeah.
In our days, when we went out to, I would say locally, fete,
Yes.
you're going to see if you could get a dance with a lovely lady for the night, and you're happy if you get one. We never walk with anything except with two hands and with foot, and probably a little money in my wallet if you had to buy a drink.
Sometimes you had to walk home too.
Yeah, but you know, it was never a situation where we go in with spikes and knives and hiding cutlass in the bush and all kind of nonsense too. Because as you say, the mindset is so different.
It is.
The mindset is one of expectation of a confrontation and violence and the ability to react.
Yes.
Whereas in our time, it was nothing like that at all. It didn't used to cross my mind.
Yes. And you know this have a spiraling effect.
Yeah.
Because if I know I'm going to a session where half of the people are armed, if I go there, I'm vulnerable. unarmed, I'm vulnerable. So I'm feeling now I need to arm myself. And probably I need to be better armed than the others.
Well, there was
and
a study
this is where
done.
we have firearms and so forth
Yeah,
coming
there was
in
a
now.
study done years ago in the banks, and it was about guards carrying a live weapon
Yes.
versus carrying a chon-chon, as we always call it. And it was from the study that guards that had a gun on their waist was far more open to being shot and killed, because the guys who coming in to do the thing come in armed better than him.
Yes.
But if they know you have a chon-chon, then but they know you can't do me not much.
Right, because what are you going to do with that?
Right. You either lie down and so on. So the loss of lives
Yes.
was less.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's an interesting school of thought. And leading up to what you said, if you're going and you know people going to come with knife and you're going with yours in case something
Yes,
happens.
because,
You know,
and so that's the effect. Because, I mean, we have seen the use of firearms here more than we have seen before.
that's right. The
Ah,
Prime
it's a-
Minister spoke about
yeah,
it today.
It's,
I
a,
think.
it's a legitimate concern, and
Yeah.
obviously we have to find out where these firearms coming from. That's the first thing we need to answer. Where they coming into our shows, and how many of these firearms are in circulation out there? Are we more armed than the police force? Probably. You see, and you have heard about shootings that take some time to solve, albeit the police do a pretty good job at solving these crimes.
Yeah,
And
kudos to them,
Kudos
yeah.
to the Royal Grenada
Very
Police
well-
Force
very good
for
job, yeah.
the very hard work that they are doing, and even putting themselves at risk. These are men of our community and women of our community with families trying to
yeah.
make a living. And they're putting themselves at risk because now you have more violent crimes committed. It is not just cutlass and knives and so forth. We are speaking about ammunition, you know, and powered weapons and so on. So I think we really need to be proactive as a society in terms of how we address this. Certainly, we need to find out where the firearms are coming from. We need to have better management, probably at our points of entries. We need to have more stop and search, similar to what the Royal Grenada Police Force did yesterday.
But there's I
Random
just
search
want to
and so
touch on something a little different. There's a mood, a change in the society that we are becoming far more lawless.
Yes.
In terms of obeying basic laws, basic traffic rules. You see a police and authority in uniform, and you have no respect for that officer, whether it's male or female. And there seems to be a pervasion in the society. And I don't want to say only young people, because you've seen it with adults as well,
Yes.
where we tend to just ignore what we know to be the correct thing to do and the lawful thing to do. And everybody just doing what they want.
Yes.
It is a society that is moving fast in that direction, and we seem to not be able to curb that and bring that back. And the question that will come up in the debate is, do we strengthen our laws? I heard a lady this evening before I got here speaking about the sentences that were dished out to people who are killed and maimed and raped, and it seems to be very little in terms of what they get. And the question is, and she was calling for a greater review of the laws and most heavy laws for perpetrators of these crimes.
Certainly.
And I don't know if that will help, because we just seem to be a society that is getting far more lawless when it comes to just following basic rules.
It's true.
Well, if I know if I take a life, I will get life.
Yeah.
Imprisonment.
Yeah.
That might affect my behavior when I think about taking a life. If I think like, okay, I could probably kill you, and I go sit in Richmond Hill for 10 years and probably do a degree while I'm there, it might affect my behavior pattern. But again, human behavior and the value that we place on our fellow humankind is what is affecting us. And
Okay, hold on,
we're
have-
not just physical beings.
Okay, just a second. We have a caller on the line. Go ahead, caller, please. You're on.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening to your panel. Good evening to your panel, and good evening to Mr. Vishay.
Good evening.
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 Go ahead.
Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, Mr. Campbell, I want to ask you all a question.
Hold on, just a bit more volume.
And the question that I want to ask is, what became of all the weapons, all the guns that was in circulation here in Grenada during the revolution? That's question one. The other thing I want to say is, yes, it is understood that we have open borders here in Grenada. Open borders, anything could come in. But I heard our leader said lately that they'll be putting measures in place to search all the persons entering the ports and so to find weapons if it's possible. I think it's going to be foolish of somebody to take a gun and put in a barrel from the United States and send to Grenada. We must remember that the United States is not the only country in the world that manufactures weapons, right? We must understand, too, that here in Grenada, we cultivating what I will call a drunken nation. And it is supported by our leaders. In the past, I know in time like this, when it's Carnival and so on, we would have activities. But if you take a good look, right, today, in these times, we have activity every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night in every village. Every village. And the persons who are involved in those activities are the youth. And they involve in the activities with beers and alcohol, boys and girls, underage as a matter of fact. And I look at many of those places, I have not seen a police officer. That is to say they are not engaged in the police, right? So as soon as something should happen in these places, the next thing we know is violence is going to start. Now, we have to understand in Grenada that we have a society to protect. And if, as leaders, we are not willing to protect our society, then we have to deal with the issues that we're dealing with now. I remember in the 70s, in the early 70s and 60s, there were only 100 or 200, 300 and something police officers in Grenada. 316 police officers in Grenada. And the 316 police officers was in control of the whole country. Right? We didn't used to have that kind of crime. We didn't used to have people drunken and getting on this all the way people do.
Thank you, thank you,
Look
thank
on
you,
your television
thank you, thank
and
you,
you'd see
thank you very much, caller.
life
Really
there.
appreciate. That's all the time we have. Thank you very much for your contribution. Really appreciate it. Caller raised a number of issues. The first one I'm going to respond. They ask, where are the guns from the revolution? I don't know. No, truth.
Colin, you know your past by, right? But
I
to
don't
answer
know.
the
But
caller,
I think most of them were taken by the
back.
Americans
That's
and
correct,
shipped.
that's
Even
correct.
the armored cars and the heavy weaponry,
Yeah.
aircraft weaponry and so on. These were all removed from the country, as far as I know. But one of the big question raised, and I hope you would extend it. But what I want to pick up here is that we've seen a lot of community events all over the country, and there's no security there. And that's where a lot of the violence are taking place. That's a place where a lot of the alcohol is being consumed.
There's a lot I can say about these community events. Some people will say it is the season and it's cultural.
Yeah.
But this community event doesn't just happen within the season.
Yeah.
Once it's a holiday in Grenada, there is jab in our communities, and that's just a reality.
Yes.
And the caller is right. There's a lot of underage consumption of alcohol, and it's not well regulated. But you know what amazes me about this? If the church does the same thing, go into the community every day and have events like that, people will call the police and say we're making noise, we're disturbing the peace, and whatever the case is. And then it points again to our priority as a people, the value that we place on things. And oftentimes we see the gratification of the flesh, which as far as we're concerned, because we are told this in scripture, is only part of who we are, with the ignoring of the spiritual part of who we are. That we are spiritual beings ultimately. This flesh is going to die. And the spiritual part of us is what is made to live on into eternity. And we have to respond to and prepare for that time. Another thing that the caller mentioned that is example of leaders. What are our leaders doing? What is the example? I think that is affecting youth behavior as well. Because when you look at some of the ways our leaders carry on, in terms of the dishonor and disrespect to their peers, dishonor and disrespect to elders, and this is something that I feel very strongly about. I feel as a country that we have a lack of honor for older people. People who have worked, served, have now come into retirement and so forth. We seem to just not understand that these people must be honored for what we have inherited. They have worked and they have preserved what we are able to enjoy today. And as such, they deserve honor. But in our society, we seem not to have respect for these people. Sometimes I look at these people trying to cross a pedestrian crossing and how people respond to them. Drivers try to come on the bus and nobody wants to take them because they're slowing down the process.
How do we change this
and all that.
attitude, though? I mean,
And it begins again. And I'll keep going back to here. The foundation is that we have to come back to a place where we recognize that there must be respect for humankind And that respect begins with us appreciating that there is a creator who created all of us equal. And no one is better than anyone. No one is badder, to use the local word, than anybody else.
As a Trump word, Barbara.
Right? We must always be operating in a way of respect. But that type of respect requires transformation of the humankind. And I don't know any better way for persons to be transformed than by having a relationship with Jesus Christ. I came from a single parent household. And I believe the reason why I am the way I am and I see life the way I do is not because my mother was just a strong woman, and she was. But it is because I came into a relationship with Jesus Christ at an early age, and that didn't just teach me to read the Bible and pray, but it taught me how to treat other people, how I must relate and behave in different situations. In the time I grew up, even parents who did not go to church would send their children to Sunday school. That was a regular thing. Parents saying, you need to go to Sunday school. And they were able to learn values. But now in our society, there seems to be a certain disdain for the church. Oh, you don't need to go
So
there.
is the church failing in its messaging, particularly to the younger population?
What's
your assessment of this? Because you go to the congregation, you look at the church, and well, it may vary in different churches, but my observation is that I tend to see more of the middle, older people there, and not the younger, the youths in their late teens and 20s. I don't see this age group there. I wouldn't say at all, but certainly not in any significant numbers. Why is this so?
So I can speak for what we have done as a church at Agape Ministries.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty young.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I'm the
Yeah,
bishop.
so yeah, fine.
Right? I'm still in my 30s. Yes?
Yes.
And our average age within our church is also within the 30s.
Okay.
Right? So we do have younger people and we have a few older persons
Yeah.
or whatever. So what we have done is to be very inclusive and proactive, that young people do not just come to church to just be in the pews, but they are actively part of the local church. We do not see the church as just a place where people come to be preached to, and prayer is important, but not just to pray, but there must be a holistic approach, because life is more than just being within the four walls of the church. You're there once per week, but every other day in the week, you are encountering things in life, and the church ought to prepare for that. So what we have done is that we have established different ministries that caters to every demographic within the church, from baby all the way up to
Right.
to being an elder. Yes, and these ministries do not just teach you things; they empower you to become the best that you can be. To identify the different potential, because everyone is unique and everyone have a different gifting, everyone have a different potential. So to identify your gifting, to identify your potential, and to be able to flow within that gifting and potential. And I believe, and I would admonish churches that are struggling to have young people involved to embrace that. Another thing about church is that sometimes we reject our culture a little bit too much. So for example, in terms of the music that we accept, we feel that we have to sing the traditional music that is given to us, passed down to us by the colonialists.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
But you can sing genres of Caribbean music that appeal to Caribbean people, young people.
Yes.
Music that has vibes, but it's spiritual music,
Yeah.
right? That can cater to our people, and that would be attractive. But if I come and it's something that is foreign to my culture and literally boring, I would not be encouraged to be there.
Introducing steel band in church,
Oh,
making it. Yeah, I
Most
see that
certainly.
point. But I mean, going back to the caller again, Christian, one of the big points, Roger, is the consumption of drugs, alcohol in particular. Here we see the carnival is here, certainly. There are persons that are fearful. I've heard individuals saying, look, I'm not going anywhere. You know, I'm staying home. I'm going to look at it on TV. I'm going to take it in elsewhere. There's a fear among some people, I would say, not widespread probably, but because there's a relationship between alcohol consumption and violence.
And deviant behavior.
And deviant behavior.
Yeah.
What can we say about that? How can we manage this? Is it manageable at all?
Well, I want to add another element to Devon, and that is there a prevalence that you have observed through your ministries of depression, and the issue of depression among not just our young people, but depression generally across our population, probably being fueled by economic issues, lack of spirituality? And I want to make the distinction between religiosity and spirituality. There's a big difference.
Yes.
And how do we as a society deal with it? And I suppose we're going back to the mental thing. But is there, and I agree with you, the holistic approach should be through something like a social partners committee, because it needs to be multi-pronged,
Yes. it
the
must be.
approach. So I agree that our government should probably look at that in that sense. But depression seems to be a major issue we're facing in the society. And it takes various forms, many forms.
Yes.
And some of us have to be trained to
We
recognize.
see the increase in suicides.
Yes, and is there something we could do, not only from a religious point of view, but from a societal point of view, to help in that matter, help in that issue?
Yeah, I believe that we need to certainly utilize a lot more for avenues that influence human behavior to message hope. So, for example, we have seen an uptick in the consumption of alcohol over the years, and I would accredit a lot of that to our music, because our music is promoting alcohol. I'll accredit a lot of that to, in terms of marketing terms, how sexy we have made alcohol look, in that it's trendy, you know, to walk with a Stag or walk with a Carib or walk with whatever brand there is. And it is also trendy to drink Flanker and whatever else.
Yeah.
You know, you feel like you're in thing. It's a cool thing to do. So if marketing has affected human behavior in that way, and we know that the statistics shows us that it does, then can we not market values? Can we not also market positivity?
But somebody will push back and say alcohol consumption was always there.
Yes.
It's just that we seem to be bringing it to the extreme now.
Oh yes,
And that is the problem.
It was always there, but at a different level.
That's right.
And acceptable at different age groups.
You
Because
know-
I remember in my time growing up, and I'm not very old, that was not a far time ago, when the guys were drinking.
Just 1 second. We
Yes.
have a comment on Facebook. I just given it that what the writer is saying is that the problem with the churches is one of hypocrisy, that they're getting involved too much in politics. This is a comment that we have coming on our Facebook page.
Oh, I commend the person for the comment. The church ought not to be political as an entity,
Yeah.
but there's nothing wrong with members of the church being political.
Okay.
Yes, so I do not want to go into a church and hear nobody preaching to me party politics. I didn't go for that. I went for my soul to be edified and my spirit to be edified. Like, for example, within our own congregation, we have many persons within our congregation who are members of different political parties. Some people are apolitical, they don't want to hear anything about politics. We have persons who are executive members of political parties, both major parties in our country.
But not
in the
your
same
church. But not
congregation.
your church. But you see evidence of other churches.
No, I don't think I've seen a lot of evidence of the church on a whole being political within the church.
Okay.
I have seen, though, more Christians getting involved in politics, which I believe is commendable.
Okay.
I mean, I know people have different views on this, but when you look at the scripture, David, who was referred to as a man after God's own heart, was a king. A king was a politician. So, I mean, there's no running from that. But he was a man after God's own heart. So you can be a believer and be a politician. The problem is when the church on a whole start compromising, and that's why I said I would commend the person who commented, is when the church on a whole starts compromising. So, for example, because of my politics as a pastor, I would not speak out on certain issue, although I probably should. I would not advocate certain issue. So, for example, if I'm a pastor and I would say, you know what, I don't want to speak about crime because it is unpopular. It may make this person look bad. So therefore, I shouldn't do it. But I have a responsibility to do it. Then it becomes an issue and it becomes compromising. But I think there's a lot of cases where the church is unfairly attacked. So oftentimes...
And who's the church?
The church, I'm referring to a born-again group of persons who have made a decision to serve Jesus Christ.
Okay.
And as a whole. I'm not speaking about religion now. That's a whole different thing.
Different.
The religion is a problem, right?
And this is a follow-up question from the individual. Yeah.
Yes,
go ahead,
certainly.
please, yeah.
So I'm speaking about real bona fide born again people who
Yeah.
have accepted Christ and decided to live a life that is pleasing to Christ. And I believe sometimes we use the church loosely, and many times people are like, oh, where is the church? We're not here in the church. And then when the church speak, they're like, you guys shouldn't be speaking. Because this has nothing to do with the church. Just focus on what you focus on. But the church has an integral role to play in society. And this is why, as a church, Agape Ministries, together with many of our evangelical brethren, we are going to be involved in praying for our nation this Thursday. Because we have a role to play.
And this is taking place nationally, or is it in a particular location?
Yes, so it is happening on Thursday, and it's going to be from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. Right at the Esplanade Courtyard.
Yeah.
So we are using the city as a point of contact to pray for our nation, and we're inviting everyone to come. We think that is a time when we need to forget about our differences, because this is now Christ. This has nothing to do with any political party. It has nothing to do with any race or whatever else. It has to do with us responding in a spiritual way to what we perceive to be a spiritual problem to a large extent. And it's not just spiritual, but obviously a big part of it is spiritual. And we're inviting everybody to come down on Thursday at the Esplanade. And I must say here that we'll also be streaming on various media in terms of what
Is
is
this
happening
part of the
there.
Conference of Churches? Is your congregation, your
so
ministry part of the Conference of Churches?
No, we are part of the Alliance of Evangelical
Alliance of
Churches.
Evangelical Churches. Okay.
Yes.
So in the next, Chris, we have to. Any further
we have to
questions? Any
wrap up.
final?
No,
Yeah,
I-
fine. So let me give you the final 30 seconds to wrap up to make your final statement.
So I want to use this
Bishop.
opportunity to really encourage everyone who is viewing and listening to understand that all of the ills that we have in society, there are biblical answers to all of these problems. And it begins with one realizing that we are created by a maker, our Lord, our Savior, and we have a responsibility to therefore respond in a way of acknowledging this Creator by making a decision to serve Him. We must encourage our children to also do so and to teach them the values from the manual that this Creator has given us for life, which is the Word of God. Finally, I want to encourage everybody to join us on the Esplanade Courtyard on Thursday from 4:30 p.m. If you're coming from work, just pop over. It's only 2 hours. We're going to be there. We are going to be praying for our nation. Just take a time, join us, pause with us, and let's just pray for Grenada.
Thank you very much, Bishop Roger. Viewers, we want to thank you, colleague Chris. Thank you for being with us here this evening. We will see you, and I want to thank the various technical crew. Have a good evening. We'll see you next week, same time. Good evening.
Concerned about your general health and wellness?
Do you need to know your complete blood